So, some disappointing NFL news today. Well, for me at least, I know some of you guys did not want this guy, but Yannick Ngakoue will be franchise tagged by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm sure you guys heard about this by now. And look, I'm disappointed about it. He was my number one guy this offseason, the guy I really wanted, but now there's this rumor out there, I think put out by fans, that like, would you trade the number 4 overall pick for Ngakoue and the number 9 overall pick? And that's been thrown out there. Personally, I would say no. I wanted to sign him as a free agent. I don't want to give up, 5 spots in the draft just to get him. I feel like that would make no sense. And then once you trade for Ngakoue, you'd have to give him that big contract as well. So you're basically moving back 5 spots and having to pay a guy $20 to $22 million. And I don't want to fall back that far in the draft if it's going to cost, for one player that we could have gotten free agency. So it is what it is, and now I'm going to move on. So now we're going to talk about Jadeveon Clowney, another guy who might be franchise tagged. He probably won't, but he might. I think that, it doesn't end until I forget what the date is, but I think we have a couple weeks left until the franchise tags are done. So he might be a franchise tag, but I'm not counting on it exactly. But I have mixed feelings about Jadeveon Clowney. I want to dive into a little bit. So Clowney, he was picked number 1 overall in 2014. There were some other players in this class that turned out a lot better, like Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald, so he didn't live up to the number 1 potential yet, in my opinion. But Clowney as a player, he plays at a high level when he wants to. We've seen some games from him where he just looks unbelievable and dominates, but then we've seen games from him where he just does absolutely nothing. So it's really confusing as to what type of player this guy is, and is it worth giving him a big contract? That's really the big question here. So sometimes he does amazing things on tape where there was that play in college where he blows up that run play, and that really put him on the map, I feel like, or not put him on the map, but really open people's eyes to who is this guy, and eventually went number 1 overall. And there's some plays in the NFL as well where he just blows up a run play or can just get to the quarterback real quickly. So he has some really amazing plays, but then sometimes he just doesn't do anything, so it's very frustrating. But he does blow up plays, and he can wreck a game at times. We saw it against the Eagles in the playoffs this year, but we've also seen games where he doesn't really do much. Against the Packers, he didn't have a great game. I think he had a couple penalties in that next game in the divisional round, so that wasn't so good. But he's only 27 years old. He just turned 27 last month, so he's still pretty young, has youth on his side. But to me, he's not a sure thing, and we'll get into the negatives about him right after this. So as I always do before talking about these guys, to not sound stupid on the microphone, I went back and watched Jadeveon Clowney from this year. And the one thing that popped out at me was not a good thing. It was a negative thing. It was how many penalties this guy got. So I decided to go back and look at the penalty leaders over the past 2 seasons, and did not bode well for Jadeveon Clowney. So he led the NFL in 2019 for penalties for defensive players, and then in 2018 also led in the regular season for penalties for defensive players. So back-to-back years of leading all defenders in penalties. That's definitely a negative thing right there. And Joe Judge has said the word fundamentally sound the words fundamentally sound probably 100 times during his interviews and whatnot so far. So I don't think Joe Judge would want a guy creating penalties and losing yards for his defense. I don't know if that's the type of guy he would want. But that's just another thing. So on to injuries. This is the big one. So he's had 5 surgeries since 2014. Some were bigger than others. He had some kind of core surgery, hernia surgery, whatever it was, and then some smaller stuff. But still, surgery. So it's definitely not what you want to see. He has missed 9 games since 2015, which I guess isn't terrible, and he's missed 4 games in the past 2 seasons. Also not terrible, but it's not what you want. I wouldn't give a big contract to a guy like that who does have some durability concerns. We saw a guy, Olivier Vernon, who was a pretty effective player on the field, but he sometimes wasn't on the field. So that was definitely, the not so good part about him. So personally, if it was up to me, I would not give Jadeveon Clowney the big 5-year, $100-something million deal. I just don't see it happening. And honestly, I went back to his advanced stats and compared it to someone like Marcus Golden, for instance. And here's what happened in 2019. So Jadeveon Clowney only had 3 sacks in 2019 and had 41 hurries and then 45 quarterback pressures. Marcus Golden, who probably would get paid half as much as Jadeveon Clowney, Marcus Golden had 10 sacks, as we know, 45 hurries, which is 4 more than Clowney, and had 60 quarterback pressures, 15 more than Clowney. So, do you really want to pay a guy? I know it's 1 year, but do you want to pay a guy that much money who produced less than Marcus Golden last year? I personally would say no to that. I mean, Marcus Golden can't do what Jadeveon Clowney did in that playoff game against the Eagles. He can't take over a game like that, and Clowney is the more talented player. But why don't we see it consistently? You think, it just makes no sense to me. He has the talent to do it, but we just don't see it sometimes. So, if I was a GM, I can't say, let me throw $20-something million per year at this guy, and we'll see what happens. I mean, honestly, he might have surgery next year once again, and then all of a sudden he'll be just missing a lot of games and a lot of time. I don't want to do that. I mean, part of the reason I loved Ngakoue is because he had great health. I think he missed 3 games in 4 or 5 seasons. So, I mean, his health status is much better. There's guys that are also in free agency that have much better health history, whether it's Joe Schobert or Blake Martinez. I think Byron Jones has a good one. Corey Littleton's never missed a game. So, the Giants are probably going to spend big money on at least one defensive free agent this year, and I don't want it to be Clowney. I mean, it's nothing against him as a player, but his durability is a concern for me. He's 27 years old now, and although it's not too old, his body might break down at some point during a 5-year contract. I mean, it's just logistics. It is what it is. So, honestly, I would rather sign Corey Littleton now into a big deal. That's, my number one thing. He won't get the $20 million per year, in my opinion. I think you can get Littleton for hopefully around $16 million per year. And people talk about his coverage got worse last year. Okay, you can make the argument, but he's better than what we have right now. His missed tackle percentage was 3% last year. That's phenomenal. So I like that. And then Byron Jones is a guy who just shows up every week and does great. I mean, he's not too flashy, doesn't talk too much and whatnot, but he's one of the more underrated corners in the football. Doesn't really miss games either. Can play safety as well if needed. So he's another guy that I'd rather have than Jadeveon Clowney. So if the Giants sign Clowney, would I be really mad about it? Probably not, but I'd be very concerned because Clowney can come here and look, a new atmosphere, a new team, put up some great numbers. I mean, it really depends who's next to him. It depends if Oshane Ximines progresses into something more, or Lorenzo Carter, or if we re-sign Marcus Golden. I mean, it really depends who he has next to him. I feel like if it's just going to be Jadeveon Clowney and Leonard Williams, I mean, that's a decent line, but then you have Dexter Lawrence and Dalvin Tomlinson, who are more known for run stuffing. So I don't know how many pass rushers you would have at that point, so I think it depends who you put next to him, but I personally believe Oshane Ximines will get better next year. You guys know I loved Oshane for a while, so I'm hoping for a lot from him next year. So that's what I want, but look, I mean, if they sign Clowney, I wouldn't be too pissed about it, but very concerned. That's all I have to say. So I think that's all I got for this video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you next time.